Friday.
Fabulous Friday, darling. Fabulous Friday. We're here.
I have to tell you, what you see is not what you get with some people. Don't you agree? Because I'll explain why I'm saying that. Because I've had a friend. It's not a close friend, but she's actually become more of a friend over the last couple of years I've known her. Because she's married to a working colleague of mine. And to describe her, she looks more like a Julie Andrews rather than a Katie Price. Do you know what I mean? She's very sort of prim, wears sort of Laura Ashley clothes, a little bob, very sweet. But you wouldn't think she'd done very much in her life other than be a wife and a mum. And last night, she phoned me for some reason, and she told me about her life before she was married to this lovely guy that I know. And she has played crap games with Telly Savalas. She's been jet-setted out to Monte Carlo. She's been out with a gangster. I mean, you would not believe it. And you just think that women of a certain age, you know, they're judged, aren't they, sometimes, especially if they dress in a certain way. And let's face it, as we are all approaching over 25.
35.
Yes, we know that one, don't we, Harriet?
We do,
Sherry and Debbie.
Well, I have to tell you, I was sick over Steve McQueen.
Sick?
The film actor, not the director.
Oh, God, I thought...
Oh,
yes.
Really?
Please tell us.
I was a young actress at drama school, and he came to give us a talk, and I was chosen to take him on a red bus because that's what he wanted to do, American actor. And so with all his people, I went on I couldn't speak at all because it was Steve McQueen. And to thank me, he took me to a restaurant called the Poissonnerie. And I know now the poisson meant fish, but I didn't know that then. And we sat up at a bar, and they brought, he said, what would you like? I couldn't speak. So he said, I'll order for you, because obviously he was dying to get away with this stupid girl. But he, you know, it was a publicity stunt. And they brought me a bowl of what I now know was clam chowder. And I ate it and immediately projectile vomited over Steve McQueen in the Poissonnerie. And he was covered in sick. He went outside. I immediately went outside and vomited all over the pavement. And his people literally picked me up off the floor and threw me in a black cab, threw some money. And to this day, out of that little window of the black cab, I can see Steve McQueen with his white polo neck jumper with sick all down him. And I thought, well, he's never going to marry me now.
You didn't get a second date.
No, exactly. Well, I think that's a wonderful, wonderful story.
It's very sad.
I mean, how interesting that they did that in those days. They went to drama schools. Big stars like that actually went to drama schools to meet the pupils.
Only it's a publicity stunt, though, isn't it? You know,
it doesn't matter. Still fantastic. Still a fantastic.
I know we had a lot of people at RADA. We had a lot of people come over from America, and we were all, none of us could speak. It was just amazing. But going back to you, Dee, I have to tell you that I believe that ladies of a certain age do not want what everybody in this world thinks. We're the only country in the world that writes our age on our forehead.
Yeah, I agree.
Nowhere else in the world.
No one goes down the street with their age over their forehead, and that's the other thing. I mean, as actresses as well, it's so ridiculous because they don't say, you know, they cast a part and they say. I mean, I've got three jobs in 1 week. One was to play a woman over 60. One was to play a woman who was 35. And one was to play a woman of 50. What the hell? Which means the casting, nobody knows what you're supposed to be. So one was obviously supposed to be rough. But Tony McHale is great because whenever he writes for women, obviously, because he's obviously married to a woman who says this to him, I should think.
Yeah.
But when Tony McHale writes, he writes a glamorous woman of any age.
Well, of course.
Quite right.
I mean, the world is crazy. I have to tell you this quick story. I went for a job, and it was for a drama series. And I walked in, and the director said, "Oh, don't bother sitting down. You're wrong." And I went, "Why?" Young actress. Whoa. And he went, "Well, we wanted somebody with." I had very long dark hair with blonde hair. I said, "I can be blonde." And he went, "No, like a short." I said, "I can cut my hair." He went, "For God's sake, you're wrong." I said, "Why am I wrong?" And he said, "Because you're not old enough." I said, "I can look older." He said, "But you're not tall enough." I said, "I can look tall." He said, "Oh, for God's sake, here's the bloody script. You've got the job. Just get out of my office."
There you
That's the
go.
way to
I want to get
Wouldn't
back
do
to
it now.
what Dee was saying before, which was about one's endless perceptions of what we think people should and shouldn't be, and what people think we will be at this age. And again, I remember turning 50, and all the sort of freebie mail that came through the door, not living ones, obviously, were things like, you sort out your will and get a free pen.
Oh, I know.
And then that whole imagery is so extraordinary. And yet every youthful generation thinks this is the time they're doing all the extraordinary things. You have no idea how bad we are. And recently, because I'm working now at the moment as well, I get tested every day or twice a week for COVID. And people say, oh God, isn't it awful having the swab at the back of your throat? And I'm like, darling, we all grew up in the 80s. It's nothing.
Nothing.
True.
Remember.
Exactly. And that's the other thing, you've got the president of the United States as well, being a certain age, both of them, whoever they are, Donald Trump and Biden, whoever is the president of the United States.
In the 70s.
They're in their late 70s and they're running around. So age is just a number. I mean, it's ridiculous, and we should not be defined by our age. I absolutely 100%
And actually,
I totally agree.
in Venice, years ago, hundreds of years ago, 70-year-old men ruled the country. Ancient men ruled the country, and they didn't have a war for 100 years because there was no testosterone, and they were mature, and it was calmer. Unfortunately, we can't say the same, but
But I have to say, for women of a certain age, it's very different for women than it is for men, and it always will be. There's always that stigma. When you go on holiday, people think you want to be something, and they go, and how old are you? I remember my mother was having a carpet laid, and the carpet man came and sat down. He said, could you sign this form? She went, yes. And he went, right, your age? So what has that got to do with my carpet?
Yeah. Well, yesterday, EDF Energy rang me, and they said, okay, it's EDF Energy. We want to talk to you about your bill. So I'm chatting away, and he goes, right, give me your email address, date of birth for my electricity bill.
no,
Crazy.
Why? For my electricity bill, I had to give them my date of birth. I mean, this is absolute. So I said, no, I refuse. Why do you need to know? All you need to know is I pay your bill. I pay your bill. Why do you need to know how old I am?
My mother used to say, I'm as old as my tongue and a little bit older than my teeth. That's all you need to know.
And my mother used to say, a woman who tells you her age cannot be trusted because it means she'll tell you anything.
And she'll tell you a lie as well, hopefully.
Yes, exactly. So a woman that tells you her true age. Well, girls, we have a man. Well, we have a man who's coming into the nest. In fact, he's flown into the nest. He's flown to the nest all the way from Scotland. His little wings must be very, very tired. He is an author.
Are they little wings?
Little. Well, it might be big wings. We don't want to insult him. His big wings. He is, apart from being a very gorgeous looking man, which I don't want to embarrass him, but it is true. He's a journalist. He is an archaeologist. He's a historian. Is there anything this man can't do? It's Neil Oliver. Hello, Neil.
Yay.
I was wondering who you were talking about there. He sounds great.
I know.
He does.
Great.
What's coming on later, Neil?
Thanks for having me. It's lovely to see you all this afternoon.
Lovely to see you.
Lovely to see you.
Welcome to our nest.
Neil, tell me about, you've been very, very vocal during lockdown. Tell me what you felt about it.
Oh, well, I suppose it's been a sort of evolving story, really. When it began, like many people, we were all very anxious about it. We weren't quite sure what the virus was, what effect it would have. So we were minded to lock down along with everybody else. But then as the weeks turned into months, and now it's becoming a year, I think it's been a mistake to keep everyone locked down as much as they have been for such a protracted period of time, because of the collateral damage that has inevitably been done to people's well-being in all sorts of ways, to the economy, to the trust that people have between, the trust that ought to be there between leaders and led. So I think it should have been, and the signs were there that it ought to have been handled differently early on. So I'm very frustrated now with the continuation of what I see as an ultimately damaging practice.
So what have you been doing during lockdown? Have you written another book? Because I saw this fantastic book that you sent me, Wisdom of the Ancients, which I love. Have you been writing any more?
Well, I'm in the middle of another book, another popular history book. When I say popular, I mean for the general reader. So I possibly should have been busier with that than I have been. I think some people found the lockdown a time of intense creativity for whatever personal reasons. I've found it difficult to work, actually. Although I've been, trapped at home, as it were, I haven't actually found it conducive to being as creative as I normally am. I think I function better when I'm busy with all sorts of other things. At the same time, the busier I am, the more time I seem to find for everything else that I need to do. So I've found it difficult. I continue to write a weekly column for the Sunday Times up here in Scotland. That's been a kind of a godsend, because it's been something to focus upon. I do a podcast, Neil Oliver's Love Letter to the British Isles. I do that with a good friend of mine, so we put one of those together at least every week. And the rest of it really has been very much been dedicated to the well-being of the family. We've got 3 kids aged 17, 14 and 12, and they've got lots of questions and anxieties from time to time about what's happening. So the focus is really, honestly, my focus has been very much on the house and the family and just trying to keep the wheels on the wagon, so to speak.
I saw an interview with you, I think it was yesterday or the day before, and you were very passionate about the British Isles, and it made me think about it, because I don't think people appreciate this country that we all live in, because if you go from Scotland to Devon, the softness of Devon, the cragginess of Scotland and the mountains and the lakes, and I don't think people see it as much as they should. And I know you're passionate about it and the history of it, and you've written this book, The History of the British Isles, 100 Places. So what made you write that book?
Well, you are right. It comes, I'm sort of old enough now that I'm not bashful about talking about love and what I love and who I love. And I do very much love the landscape of the archipelago of the British Isles. I think I always did. I was fortunate enough to, grow up in a family where, my dad especially was desperately interested in being out and about, especially in the Highlands of Scotland, but anywhere else besides, really. And then a huge privilege that I've had, that I'm aware of, is that I was put on the magic carpet of television 20 odd years ago. And by luck, more than good judgment, I've been taken to so many places, some of them well-known, iconic places like the White Cliffs of Dover or wherever, but I've also been to places that are well off the beaten track. And so I've been blessed with having been taken on a bespoke tour. And I've often wondered if anybody else has seen all of the places that I've seen. And I suppose you're right that for lots of reasons, people don't get the opportunities to see the variety of the place. And if you don't have that opportunity, then I suppose how could you fail but to take it for granted and to overlook the great variety that's there. All I can say is personally, I've seen so much of it, had so many encounters with fantastic people, heard so many stories, that I just genuinely feel that I'm living in a blessed landscape. It's not exceptionalism. I'm not banging the drum and saying this place is better than everywhere or anywhere. It's just that I have come to know my homeland intimately. And it has become the case for me that the national boundaries all blurred and disappeared long ago. So I don't think about it in terms of Scotland, Ireland, England and Wales at all.
Yeah.
I just see one place, which, as you rightly described, is hugely varied in terms of the look, in terms of the climate and the atmosphere and the dialect and the ways of life and the foil idiosyncrasies and the eccentricities. And it's living in a treasure box. And some of it's not lovely. And that's also true. In the same way that when you fall in love with someone properly, you're well aware of the dark and the not so nice.
It's not always good.
How you cannot properly love someone unless you're aware of their shortcomings as well as those things which make them particularly attractive to you. But who wants to live with a one-dimensional person anyway? You want the sour as well as the sweet and the dark as well as the light. And if when you come to see the whole place, its shortcomings as well, the things that happened in the past that we wouldn't be proud of, shouldn't be proud of, that run alongside the things that we ought to be proud of and that we ought to remember. And I have just had a 20-odd year experience of getting to know someone so well and having inadvertently completely fallen in love with them. And I'm just happy to say that.
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
you must have had many moments when you've thought, this is amazing. You know, I want to say to just look at this. This is amazing. You must have had many of those moments.
Oh, indeed. I mean, genuinely too many. I couldn't begin to list them. It's maybe as useful as anything else to say that there's a place that we go to. I live in Stirling, right in the centre of Scotland, and whenever we get the chance, we go up and we rent a cottage in a village on the coast called Ely. It's in the East Neuk of Fife.
Yeah, I've heard of it, yeah.
And we've been there more times than I could count. And the big attraction of it really is a long ribbon of white sand, a long beach.
Yeah.
And really, for me, every time I go, all I want to do is stand on the beach and look out at the sea. And every time I do that, I just know that all the knots that have been tied in my rope since the last time I was there just seem to loosen and untie themselves.
Oh.
And it's not that it's being taken to somewhere that's new or to have a wonderfully exciting experience. It's just like, going back to the cradle or going back to, to mother's arms. It's just somewhere that reminds me that at the heart of things there are things to be cherished and valued. And I get that in a place that's only an hour and a half from where I live. And I could offer up 1,000 other examples, but the truth of it is that the time I spend there on the beach, looking out at the water, watching the light change, feeling the wind change, just reminds me that this is a place worth valuing.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's so wonderful. That's so wonderful, Neil. And you have another passion, don't you, for dogs and Irish wolfhounds. And I've heard you talk about Gracie, who's a real inspiration to you.
She is. I write about Gracie from time to time. She's 4. She's an Irish wolfhound. So she's, for people unfamiliar with the breed, she's among the giant dogs. She weighs about 9 stone. On her hind legs, she would be taller than me. So she's very large. But people who have experience of the bigger dogs, she's unbelievably gentle. She's particularly fond of kids. We've got younger members of the family, nieces and nephews, and they're amongst those breeds that are described as nanny dogs because they're very. I mean, the great legend of the wolfhounds is Gellert, an Irish wolfhound that was given to a Welsh prince who, famously died protecting an infant. That's the legend of Gellert. If anybody wants to look it up, and I do write about her because she, like anyone who owns a dog, if you watch them and pay attention to them, they do teach you things. Not least that they take, they especially during lockdown, say, when everybody is so anxious, your dog just wants to get on with its routine, wants to go out, wants to go for a walk, wants to enjoy simple things like a corner of toast or the lick of a plate before it goes in the wash, wants to be with you. And there's an enormous solace to be had from sharing your life with another species. Other human beings are terrific, obviously, but to make space in your life for another species and to realise that across the boundary between species, you can actually make the connection. And for us, I grew up with a dog. We didn't get a dog again until I thought I was in a place where I would be able to properly look after her, but by which I mean that she's never alone. There's always, my wife is either here or I'm here or we're all here.
Yeah. I
can't bear the thought of a dog being in a house alone. So we have the dog now. And yes, I am especially fond of Irish wolfhounds, but I love dogs. I think they have a wisdom all of their own that if you share your life with one, they become a touchstone and a true north that you can depend upon.
Yeah.
I think you're so right, and it's so moving. I had a Wolfie, and I also had a Border Terrier at the same time, so little and large. And I also had 4 cats. So it was like I was a carer for 100 different furry animals that all shed. And my Wolfie teethed, as they do as puppies, on a sofa bed, had the whole sofa bed. It was a joy. But they are the most wonderful, as you said, gentle, nurturing souls. They look like they would have you in a second, because they're brilliant, and they're, you know, and all the sort of scary movies of the past, they were always the dogs that were ready to pounce, but they are the most gentle, wonderful things. I'd like to ask you, if I may, and it was so interesting hearing you talk about your dad and also about lockdown, but what's next for you? Now you have, we're moving towards a freedom. Do you have plans for your next book, your next program? What gets your appetite? What is the next thing for you?
Well, I very much hope that we are, you say, you know, returning to freedom. And I hope that, I wish for that with all of my heart, because I'll be honest and say that I harbour some anxieties about whether or not we will, in the short term or ever, get back to the kind of normality that I crave. I think
it's so interesting you say that, though, because, you know, when you look at history, which you do endlessly, the trauma and chaos of the world and throughout history, people do return. It may not be the same, but it moves on. And is there something that interests you about what's next? And you're so right, we're all anxious, and that's, you know, it was, I mean, Debbie has a pack of dogs, so she bonds with animals in a big time. And it was her idea to start this show. And because of this, we have kept ourselves mentally, not say physically, obviously, because we're sitting down and chatting most of the time and eating a lot, but we kept ourselves going with this amazing show. But for you, what is it? There must be some grain of hope, of thrill about what else you can communicate to all of us with your talent and your wisdom.
I think, I feel that the need to perhaps think along more, I suppose I want to say, philosophical lines. You mentioned the last book I wrote, which was called Wisdom of the Ancients, where I was consciously trying to get beneath the white noise that we've created for ourselves in the 21st century with social media and with 24-hour news and the constant deluge of data and all the rest of it. And I felt that for all that we have, you know, in some respects, there's never been a better time to be alive in terms of medicines and technology and all of the rest of it. More people alive, more people fed, and yet there's terrible unhappiness. You know, so many people depending on antidepressants and beta blockers and therapies of all sorts. And I thought that seemed like a disconnection, that we ought not to be as unhappy as so many of us evidently are. And so I went looking for the way that people used to think and used to answer the big questions, to see the answers that they found in their world and time, in circumstances unimaginably different to ours, and with a much lesser toolkit, you might say, to see if what made them happy, and if the answers upon which they depended in their worlds and times might help us in our world and in our time. And I think we sometimes, well, there's also been, there are many ideologies around us at the moment. Recent creations of thinking, you know, from the 19th and the 20th centuries that caused so much horrific trouble for people in the 20th century and are still causing trouble around the world today. So that I think that underneath it, there are, I believe in the truth. I think the truth is there. The truth is out there, as they used to say in the X-Files. And that not all facts are true, but not all truth is fact. You know, in the same way that all thumbs are fingers, but all fingers are thumbs.
Absolutely.
And I think I want to go back and have a look at seeing if I can isolate, I suppose, maybe more of what I consider to be the truth. I sometimes imagine the analogy of a brass rubbing. You know, if you lay a piece of greaseproof paper down on a gravestone and you rub over it with a charcoal or whatever, that anything where the charcoal touches it, it brings something forward. And where something is really prominent and gets rubbed more often, it becomes fixed and everyone can see it. And other parts never get touched at all, and other parts again are only lightly touched, so that there's an incomplete picture of the truth.
Neil, your next book, is it going to be looking back at what we should have learned and could have learned from our forefathers?
In short answer, the next one, I realise I often lie in bed at night and think, I wish I could tell the history of the world in an hour. I'd like to be able to stand on stage and deliver the history of the world, 5,000 years of it or 100,000 years of it, in a way that could be condensed into 60 minutes. So people would come away thinking that for even just a brief moment they could hold it in their heads, that they understood, that lovely moment, however short it is, where you think you've grasped something. So what I'm trying to do is to structure something that gives people maybe the hope of reading one book and understanding enough to explain how we've ended up in the confounded mess that we're in today.
Yes.
You've been so amazing. Thank you so much.
Inspirational, Neil.
Please, will you come back and see us again, Neil, please?
Anytime at all. It's been a pleasure to be among you. Thank you for making time for me.
And thank
also,
you, Neil.
The one thing you have to practice now is your hour-long show of the history of the world. It's non-negotiable. We want to see it on tour. So please come back with that, darling.
Please do.
Thank you.
Bye, darling. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Lovely to see you.
Bye.
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 There certainly isn't enough time to hear all that he has to say. We need him back
Yeah.
regularly. Amazing.
Yes, I think we should get him back. He also, which I thought was very interesting about that conversation, was that it was becoming very spiritual, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Very
He
spiritual.
obviously is. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to talk to him more about that, actually.
Oh my gosh, this is just what an interesting, fabulous man. Really, really
Fantastic.
What an amazing father he must be as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We need to see more of him, don't we? I mean,
We do.
People do.
We
People do.
absolutely do.
Yeah,
Wow.
absolutely. Goodness me. I have to say that moving on to less spiritual things, I have been trying out the fantastic, Tropic. Have you heard of Tropic, haven't you? Well,
Yes,
Sherry.
of course we have.
Yeah.
Of course. Keely
I've
came
been
on and
using-
talked to us about it. It was so wonderful.
That's right. I've been using the Super Greens, which is so good for
I thought
dry
you were going to say
lovely.
super glue, actually.
Super glue.
That as well, but not on my face.
We could certainly super glue things up and down, couldn't we?
Yeah.
That'd be quite a good idea.
Just on my
actually.
teeth,
Yeah.
actually.
Okay.
In the absence of dentists.
And I've tried. I love the fruit peel. I mean, I like peels anyway, but I'm always afraid because some of them are too harsh. So this is a fruit peel, and it's so gentle. And you put it on at night, and you leave it on, and it just softens. And there's another thing that all of them actually are fantastic, and they're so gentle to your skin, and yet they do work. They're not abrasive.
Do you remember me asking, because I had very sore lips that kept getting chapped, and I was recommended this wonderful stuff, but then Keely very kindly also recommended this, which is like a kind of balm, but it's called Fudge, and it's also a colour, and it stays on. It's amazing, and it smells like fudge. I couldn't be happier. I could eat fudge
all natural
all day, dear.
and all organic, I have to tell you.
Exactly.
So that's
Amazing.
yes.
Lovely.
Sorry.
Yes, we love all of these, and actually, on this basis, we have Linda's Bargain Buckets coming back next Wednesday.
Oh,
Yeah.
right,
Actually,
okay.
really, really exciting, because we need to know what bargains we can get. But you can also find out about Tropic if you go to our website, amazingwonderbirds.com. You can get how you can get hold of Keely and how you can get hold of all of these products.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the most exciting
Lovely.
thing is we have the wonderful Richard Arnold on the show tomorrow.
Oh, yes.
10 a.m.
I know.
Richard's
wait.
back in the bosom of our nest. What
Oh,
else?
yeah.
We are going to be talking about our favourite Christmas shows, Christmas things that we love about Christmas TV shows, Christmas films. So it's going to be a lot of fun. So we shall see you tomorrow.
We'll see you
Thanks,
there.
everyone.
Bye.
Bye.